Jai Jinendra. Today we shall talk about an important topic, mind. In science, brain is considered to be mind, or at the most some property of brain. Whereas in Jainism, mind and brain are different things. Mind in Jainism is not like a physical sense organ, but it is a subtle unit, and mind is different from brain. The consciousness of the soul is also expressed through mind, expressed in the body through mind. Mind exists as long as there is a flow of consciousness from soul to body. Mind is temporary. This is an important point to note, that mind is not permanent. There are two types of minds, bhav mind and dravya mind, bhav man and dravya man. Bhav mind is structured in the soul, it's a part of the soul and acts as an interface between the soul and the dravya mind. So the bhav mind has a particular role. It thinks and imagines due to the power of the soul. So mind, doesn't have its own power, but it acts by the power of the soul. Dravya mind is physical and is made up of four subtle matter, manovargana, as we know. Dravya mind interacts with senses and the external environment through senses. So dravya mind and senses work together and thereby influences the bhav mind and the soul. So the soul gets influenced by external environments because of mind. Dravya mind establishes contact or connection between the soul and the body and the external environment. So it is the dravya mind is very important here, because this makes connection between the soul and the body and between the soul and the external environment. This relationship continues as long as dravya mind exists, which also implies that the dravya mind does not always exist, It's a temporary unit, as I told you earlier. On elimination of psychical bhav karma, for example, this connection between the soul and the external environment ceases to exist on elimination of psychical karma. So when the psychical karmas are eliminated, as in the case of omniscience, the dravya mind ceases to exist and the connection between the soul and the external environment through the psychical process ceases to exist. The connection does exist through the biological process. Mind is the instrument of knowing, perceiving and cognizing. So these are the functions of mind, and we will talk about it in detail little later. In this function, mind works with senses. The sense data are communicated to the brain and then to the dravya mind, which now responds. So dravya mind responds, or rather the soul responds, as you will see. This is the way of knowing the external object. So we know the external objects through the senses and mind. Bhav mind receives the information simultaneously and perceives the object. So when the dravya mind receives the information, bhav mind also receives the same information, and now the bhav mind identifies the object and stores its memory. So it is the bhav mind, which knows what objects you are perceiving, not the dravya mind. Dravya mind is physical entity. The scope of knowledge by senses is limited to direct perception of the material world, but a bhava mind can perceive and think of both the visible and the invisible objects and substances. So, Dravya mind is limited in its activity. The scope of knowledge by senses is limited to direct perception, but the bhava mind can think of the objects which are visible and also those which are not visible, and also about the substances which are invisible or which are non-physical. Both senses and mind engage in the process of perceptual knowledge, mati gyan. So mati gyan requires both the activity of senses and the activity of mind. Excuse me. But articulate knowledge, that is Shruta Gyan, is the subject of mind only. It also mind and senses, but Shruta Gyan is a little different from Mati Gyan. Mind, Bhavaman, has memory and operates in 3 periods: remembers the past, thinks of the present, and imagines the future. So Bhavaman has this capability that it has memory, it remembers, and it operates in all 3 periods, past, present and future. Whereas this is not so in the case of senses and Dravya mind. And Bhava mind is able to do so by the power of the soul. As I told you earlier, the Bhava mind itself doesn't have its own power, It works by the power of the soul. The activity of mind goes on continuously because of the stored memories, desires, emotions and patience. So we do have these things, almost all the time, whether your memory is working or desires are working or emotions are working or patience are working, and therefore the activity of mind goes on almost continuously. Mind is influenced by our bhav. Very important point, we have bhav. We discussed this about this when we were talking about Leshya. So mind is influenced by our bhav and remains active as long as bhav exists. So bhav has a very important bearing on mind, not the vice versa. Mind stops only when these activities stop. Okay, as happens during deep meditation or when bhava produced by Kachhara or Leshya cease to exist. So when the bhava ceases to exist, the mind also stops working. The mind remains active when there are bhav or when the leshyas are active. Mind has 3 aspects. 1, cognition, 2, thinking, and 3rd, activity of mind, speech and body. And these 3 aspects work jointly. Distinction is made between mind and intellect. These 2 terms have a separate meaning. Mind is one which is thinking, intellect is one which is taking decision, buddhi. Mind is assisted by senses in its working and intellect is assisted by mind. This is the chain. Mind only surveys and analyzes the situation and intellect takes decision. And that is the intellect is the source of knowledge generation, bodhik gyan. So all our perceptual cognition or perceptual knowledge is because of intellect, buddhi. And buddhi is of four types. Number one, Utpatti ki buddhi. This is the sense of striking at the right point, which is never seen, heard, or otherwise known before, and thus leading to a successful result, which is, that means, this is your intellect, which is natural, that you can know a thing, which we did not know earlier, you have a capacity to do that. So it was never seen earlier or never heard of before, or it was otherwise never known, but you can know that object or thing by the power of this intellect, Utpatti ki buddhi. And this is your natural ability because of the intelligence of the soul, or genius, what you call as a genius. Then Vaini ki buddhi. The intellect of finding out the right solution in a complicated manner or complicated matter, it is attained through self-discipline. Now, if the person is self-disciplined, or he is a disciplined, it works in a very systematic way, then the way the intellect can find a solution to a matter is known as a Vaini buddhi, because it has come through the discipline, through your systematized thinking or systematic thinking. Then next is Karmaja buddhi, the intellect developed through practice in a particular vocation. So a person, who is working in a particular vocation for a long time can know more about that particular aspect or object, because he has been working in that field for a long time, So he has developed that ability that if there is something new comes, he can find out what it is. So this is the intellect developed through practice, And lastly, Parinamiki buddhi, the intellect attained through inference, reason, and other methods of rationality, ripened with the advancement of age. So as you grow old or you advance in your age, you have a certain ability developed, So you can reason out the things, you can have inferences, and you can have other methods of rational thinking and arrive at a particular knowledge or a particular decision. This is a Parinamiki buddhi, and all of us who are in the advanced age can realize this particular fact. Here I have shown this entire process with the help of a diagram. So you start, let us say, from the left, is written environment, The senses are the ones who sense the environment or external objects, The environment may consist of anything, whether it's a climatic conditions or an object or a particular thing in a particular form, whatever it is, that all constitute the environment, So the senses first sense the environment. Any sense, all five senses work here. Then information from the senses is communicated to brain B. Okay, it goes to brain B through our nervous system. Then brain B communicates the information to Dravya mind, which is physical. Okay, and then the Dravya mind communicates the information to the Bhav mind, which is part of the soul, as shown here. So the Bhav mind receives information through a chain of these things, senses, brain, and the Dravya mind. When the information is received by the Bhav mind, the soul likes to take a decision, So the decision is taken by intellect I, shown in the diagram at the top, I. So I is that buddhi, the intellect takes the decision, The Bhavaman only stores information. Once a decision is taken, there is a backflow of information, So information now flows back from Bhava mind to Dravya mind, and from Dravya mind to brain, because Dravya mind is connected to brain. And then brain, communicates information to the body parts, and the action takes place, This is how the system works. So I have explained here, the senses communicate sense data received from the environment to the brain. Brain is connected to Dravya mind, which transmits the information to Bhava mind and the soul. Intellect decides the response to this information. The information now flows back from the Bhava mind to Dravya mind and to the brain. And brain, the controlling unit in the body, accordingly transmits the information to body limbs for action. Now important point, how are the memories stored in the Bhava mind? How are the memories stored? Essentially, science is still searching for the solution of this problem, how are the memories stored? Some theories have been put up saying that, the memories are stored in some kind of field or some kind of hologram, and there are many views which have been put forward by scientists. But this is not really so. Memory, in fact, is stored in the Bhava mind or Bhavaman, which is part of the soul. This is a very clear view of Jain philosophy. But how does it happen? How the Bhava mind stores memory? So we make some speculations about the process, that is taking place. First, senses make contact with the object and communicates sense data to brain for processing. Okay, information from brain from senses goes to brain. Processing involves in the brain now. The processing involves neuron firing, synapses, making neuron circuits, electrical and chemical transmission, and generation of waves. These things, this aspect you have learnt in the neurological study earlier. The electric patterns or waves in the brain are supposed to produce an image in the mind DM, in the Dravya mind. So these electric patterns which is being formed in the brain, or waves which are formed, they produce a kind of image in the Dravya mind that is coupled to the brain. How exactly this happens is not known. We don't know, because what happens at the subtle level is not possible to be known. We don't have that capacity. But we assume that some kind of image is formed in the Dravya mind. The image in the Dravya mind DM may be digital form or in some electromagnetic form. That also we do not know. We are just speculating. So the image of the object which is formed in the Dravya mind can be either digital or electromagnetic. Most likely electromagnetic form. This image produces a twin and real image of the object in the Bhavaman mind. So this is how Bhavaman receives the information about the objects or the object which is sensed. What the Bhavaman is doing, the Bhavaman not only has the real image, it also registers all information about the object that is cognized or that is sensed. Okay, so it is the Bhavaman, who is the knower, or the soul, is the knower. We call the soul is the knower, and a Brahman, which is part of the soul, knows the object. It's not the physical entities. And this is Mati Gyan. So Mati Gyan, when you have Mati Gyan, the information is registered in the Brahman. So the Brahman has the memory and the image of the object. Now what is Brahman doing is very important here, that the Brahman now cross-relates this information with previous information stored in it as Shrut Gyan about the object, cognized and other items related to it. So the Brahman not only registers the image of the object or the information of the object which is sensed, but it also cross-relates this information with the previous information the Brahman has, or it has stored as a Shrut Gyan about that object or all objects which are related to this object now cognized. So this is a thing which can be done only in the soul and nowhere else. It cross-relates this information with all of the previously cognized allied objects or allied situations, and then you grasp the whole picture about that object, from where it has come, what it was related, did I do something related to this earlier, when I did it, and so on. All information is integrated in the soul. Now having done that, the information, there is a reverse flow of information now, and the information stored in the Brahman is communicated to mind DM and then to brain, so that we are able to express what we are thinking. So this information which has been integrated by the soul flows back to Dravya mind and then to the brain, and so that we are able to express. The whole thing is expressed in the brain, what we are thinking in the Bhav mind, So the brain is the place where there is a lot of game playing, it's now brain, which is the information is being processed in the brain, and therefore we are able to express it verbally. Okay? Unless the information is processed in the brain, you will not be able to speak it out. Thus, the soul integrates the bits of sense data processed in the brain and presents them back to the brain holistically for expression. Otherwise, brain is receiving the sense data in bits and pieces, but the soul integrates the whole thing, presents it back to the brain, so that as if brain knows everything. And this is the confusion which the scientists are having now. Like they think that the brain is doing everything. No, the brain is not doing. It is the soul, which is the real knower and the integrator of information. The mind DM is an intermediate link between the brain and the Bhav mind and the soul, So the Dravya Man or the Dravya mind has an important role here. Now we shall discuss a little bit about the functions of mind. The first function we talk of is cognition. How this cognition functions is accomplished. Cognition is an important function of mind. Perceptual cognition, what is called as a Mati Gyan, is the knowledge obtained with the help of sense organs and mind that we had defined earlier, that perceptual cognition takes help of both the senses and the mind. Sense signals are communicated to the brain and then contact is made with the mind. And if the contact between the sense organ and the brain is broken, mind cannot know the object. So this is the condition here, that there must be proper connection between the sense organs and mind. Okay, if something goes wrong, or there is some kind of disorder in this process, then mind would not know the object, which the senses are sensing. The thinking process starts when the object is perceived by bhava mind. So when the information goes to bhava mind, then only thinking takes place. Otherwise, thinking does not take place. Simply by sensing, thinking does not take place. There are 4 ways of mati gyan, perceptual cognition. Number 1, gyan due to sense organs. So the sense organs are also source of knowledge. This is what is emphasized here. Gyan exclusively due to mind. The mind can also generate information. Shrut gyan. Gyan due to joint activity of senses and mind. This is very common. So both senses and mind are being used in the perceptual activity. Gyan independent of both mind and senses. Okay, what we call as a instinctive intuition. This is possible. Now you can generate knowledge by intuition, where neither mind nor senses are being used. So it is your inner power or inner capability the soul has, that you get some knowledge from inside, You get an insight into certain things. Sensual experience takes place when contact is established with an object by at least one sense, So when you are talking of senses, sense could be anything, any one of our 5 senses. There are different elements of perceptual cognition. Mati gyan, there are different elements as I tell you now. Number 1, perceptual cognition takes stock of present objective datum. So you are talking only of the present, things which are existing at present. So this is one type of perceptual cognition. Then recollection, smriti, has a reference to a datum perceived in the past. So something which is perceived in the past and stored in the bhava mind, you recollect it, smriti. Then recognition, sangya, is a cognition of similarity of a past object of perception with another in the present. This is, you recognize something, if you have seen it somewhere sometime earlier and you see it now, you can at once say that, okay, I saw this at that time in the past also. So this is recognition, and you at once recognize that this is this object, Suppose there is a mobile before you and you've seen the mobile earlier, and if you see the mobile now, you at once say, okay, this is mobile, I know I have seen it earlier. Then thought, chinta, is cognition of a future event, So the soul has the power of thinking, so it thinks of future, and this is chinta. Mati Gyan is a comprehensive class of cognition. So the Mati Gyan contains all these varieties of knowledge or varieties of Mati Gyan processes. Cognition that is made by the soul by means of material symbols like words, gestures, etc., that is which have been cognized by other souls, is articulate knowledge or Shrut-Gyan. So I defined Shrut-Gyan earlier also, but I just want to emphasize here also that Shruta Gyan is the knowledge gained through symbols like words, gestures. You listen to something, somebody, or you read somewhere, or by somebody is making gestures to communicate to you something, and so on. So all this form of knowledge is Shruta Gyan. The cause of articulate knowledge is Mati Gyan. So the cause of the Shruta Gyan, the basic cause of Shruta Gyan is Mati Gyan. So the Shruta Gyan is made by Mati Gyan, in other words. And therefore Shruta Gyan, like Mati Gyan, is also produced by senses and mind. Therefore the senses become important here, even in case of Shruta Gyan. A person with Shruta Gyan can know all objects of the world, present, past and future. So Shruta Gyan has that power because of thinking power of soul. You can think of the object in the past, present or in future. What is going to happen in the future, you can also think about it. And all moods and states in the course of time. So all moods, how the moods are going to be changed of a particular commodity or a particular object, you can think about it. But this cognition is progressive and indirect. That is very important. It's indirect because you are using senses in this process. And it's progressive, that you know only step by step. You can't know all the details at once. This is not possible for you. This is possible only in Keval Gyan, when all the things are known at once, simultaneously, and the Keval Gyani doesn't have to think about it. It just appears, in his soul simultaneously. All the things. So Shruta Gyan is progressive. Okay, it happens step by step, and is indirect because of the senses. Through Shruta Gyan one knows but cannot directly perceive what is known. This is the difference between Shruta Gyan and Keval Gyan. A Keval Gyani he not only knows the object, he also perceives it. But a Shruta Gyani only knows the object but does not perceive it. In this respect, Shruta Gyan is very inferior to Keval Gyan. Although Shruta Gyan has the capability to know all the things in the world, step by step, one by one, but because you cannot perceive them, and because this process is progressive, so in that way it is very inferior to Keval Gyan, which can perceive the things simultaneously at the same time. Cognition takes place by suppression cum shading of intelligence obscuring, that is Jnanavarniya karma, and perception obscuring Darshanavarniya karma. So this cognition which we are talking of is the result of suppression cum shading, kshayopsam, of Jnanavarniya karma and Darshanavarniya karma. What happens to soul in cognition process? Okay, this is an important point to consider. What happens to soul? When you are cognizing a certain object or cognizing a certain thing or a certain process. Note that jnana is the innate property of the soul and is not imported from outside. We normally say that, I gained this knowledge. I know this, I know that, I have knowledge. So as if you have gained certain knowledge which was not there earlier. Now this is in contrast to the Jain philosophical principles. Jain philosophy says that look here, Gyan is the intrinsic property of the soul. Gyan is not coming from outside, it's not imported. So if you say that I have gained knowledge, it means something else, It doesn't mean that the Gyan has been generated. No, the Gyan already exists in you, and therefore when you say that I have gained knowledge, that is information, not Gyan. All information collected as a Mati Gyan and Shrutta Gyan is stored in the soul as a Bhav mind. I told you earlier also, So all the information is stored in the Bhav mind, and what does this Bhav mind do to the soul, So the Bhav mind, collects all the information, and its state is modified, or rather the state of the soul is modified, by this information storage. The Jnanavarni karma of soul changes from state 1 to state 2, because if you store this knowledge or information, in the Bhav mind, then the state of the Jnanavarni karma is changing from one state to another. That's all that is happening, in the process of cognition as shown in the figure. So I'll show you a figure in the next slide. So when you are gaining information or knowledge, so-called knowledge, the state of the soul is changing. The state of Jnanavarni karma is changing, that's all. And knowledge is stored in the Bhav mind. And this knowledge, that is, the knowledge is a matter of emergence, The so-called information knowledge is only emerging out of our own Gyan. Okay? Your Gyan is being uncovered a little bit by the Kshayapsam of Mati Jnanavarni karma and Shrutta Jnanavarni karma. There is unveiling or of the Jnana property of the soul. So the knowledge is a matter of emergence, it's only emerging out of our own Gyan, out of the property of your own soul, and not origination, it's, or the Gyan is not originating, it does not originate, it is already there. Increase in Shrutta Gyan causes Kshayapsam of Shrutta Jnanavarni karma. So when you have Mati Gyan and Shrutta Gyan, it causes a Kshayapsam of that karma, and it changes the state of Gyan and Darshan, from one form to another, that's all. That is, it now becomes purer, as I have shown here in this diagram. Now look here, this diagram is important to understand the whole thing. I have shown the Bhav karma here, only Bhav karma. The Bhav karma of the psychical type are emphasized here. JK is a Jnanavarni karma, starting from top. DK is a Darshanavani karma. Then the Mohini karma, and then Antaraya karma. And on the right hand side, I have shown the Bhavaman, and this Bhavaman stores information, which is coming from senses and Dravyaman and so on. Through that chain, the information is coming to the soul and stored in the Bhavaman. So the Bhavaman is the place where the information is stored. As far as the soul is concerned, its karmas are going from one state to another, state 1 to state 2, with the addition of information in the Bhavaman. If there is another addition of information in the Bhavaman, again the state of Jnanavarni karma would change from state 2 to state 3 and so on. So the information is stored in the Bhavaman, and when the Bhavaman is eliminated, for example, when all the psychical karmas have been eliminated. So the Bhaman exists so long as the psychical karmas are present in the soul. And when the psychical karmas are eliminated, okay, this happens in the case of Keval Jnana or omniscience, then the Bhamana also ceases to exist. The Bhamana exists because of the psychical karma. No psychical karma means no Bhaman, no information. So information becomes zero. In the Keval Jnana state, it's only knowledge now which remains, pure knowledge, Keval Jnana, and nothing else. Information is zero. This is a very important point to understand. There are many people who are confusing between the information and Jnana, right? So I written here in this diagram itself, Bhaman stores memory, and this ceases to exist on attainment of Keval Jnana, and now only Jnana exists and no information. This is a very important point to understand, and that must remove the confusion of many. Now, this is about the cognition process, which is very important as far as the study of mind is concerned. Now we talk of the other functions of mind, bhav, feeling, willing, and activity. Bhav of soul through Leshya are expressed in the bhav mind, mind DM, and the brain. Okay? So the bhav basically exists in the soul or in the bhav-man, and these bhavas are expressed through leshyas or through mind in the bhav mind DM, and then they are expressed in the brain. Feelings like pleasure and pain are experienced both by the sensing system and mental thinking, So both senses and mind are important in experiencing the feelings of pleasure and pain. Pleasure and pain, like Leshya, do not originate in the soul. This is very important point, Soul does not originate these feelings. So also Leshya, Leshya is also produced by actions of karma. So also the feelings of pleasure and pain are produced by actions of karma. These are not the property of the soul. So these are product of body and mind, and which work on the basis of karma. In the case of disorder or injury to body, and signals are communicated to the brain, are sensed by minds, which develops the feeling. So if something happens to the body, the signals are sensed by the mind, and you have the feeling. Generally, experience involves both the physical and mental processes. Both processes are important, for experiencing. Mental phenomena of pleasure and pain may or may not involve the operation of senses, You can have a pain and pleasure through mental activity itself, or in the other case, it happens both due to senses and mind. But the sensual activity necessarily involves mind, So this is obvious. Willing is a mental function, okay, that takes place on rise or suppression come shading of conduct deluding karma. So willing, your desires, for example, they are because of either rise or kshayopsam of conduct deluding karma, charitra mohani karma, which contains your patience, darshan mohani and conduct deluding. Conduct deluding contains only patience and no quasi patience. Senses are auxiliary cause as the soul desires what is liked by senses. So senses are also playing the role of nimitta, because you like what you see or what you hear or something like this. The senses becomes important auxiliary cause in the process of willing or desires, although this is a mental process, mainly due to the bhava-man or bhava mind. In the case of rise of karma, willing is biased. Okay, if the karma is rising, then this rising karma will make the willing, your desires, biased. In case of suppression setting of this karma, that is, if the karma is being, there is a kshayopsam of karma taking place, willing is guided by memories of bhava mind or bhava-man, So your desires then will more or less depend upon your memories, But if the karma is rising, then the karma have a strong effect on your desires. But the soul has the powers to act or not to act according to any of these forces and decide to act independently. The soul has power, whether it's a memories or karma or whatever it is, whatever the cause, the soul can override these causes and act independently according to its own will. This is called free will of the soul. The soul has the free will, and we did discuss in one of the earlier lectures also. So free will is in fact is very important part of the soul. Soul has the power to act independent of desires, independent of karma, independent of mind, and so on. Free will does not mean lawlessness or arbitrary actions. That is not the meaning of free will, which is mostly taken in that light. Free will, okay, I can do anything. That is not the meaning of free will. Although this possibility is not excluded, because there are people who take it that way. Free will is, in the positive sense, means exercising judicious decisions for stopping bondage of new karma. This is the real strength of free will, that the soul can act against karma and act in a way so that no new karma is bound. Okay, the soul has this power, and this is the real meaning of free will. In the state of omniscience, there is no will at all, because will is because of the deluding karma, and because the deluding karma has been eliminated, there is no will, no desire in the omniscient state. So the omniscient desires nothing. The mind ceases to function. There is no mind because the cyclical karmas have been eliminated, and in this case, mind ceases to exist. So all the functions related to mind stop working, in the case of omniscience. And the actions are guided by Keval Gyan. Only by the pure knowledge of the soul, the actions are guided. And the actions are all biological. The psychical actions take place by direct knowledge, Keval Gyan, And the Keval Gyan then guides the speech, the action, and so on. There is no mind, so there is no thinking. A Keval Jnani doesn't have to think to know something. It's not like us, that if I have to know something, I have to think about it. He doesn't have to think, the direct knowledge which results appears in his soul automatically because of infinite knowledge, infinite Gyan possessed by the soul, So everything appears at once on whatever he wants to express, because somebody asked the question, everything appears at once in his soul and he replies. He doesn't have to think. So In this lecture, we had talked of the important principle of mind and have distinguished between mind and brain, which is causing confusion in the scientific circles. They think that the brain is mind. Mind is entirely different thing, and we have the concepts of Dravya mind and Bhava mind, very important concepts, and then how the memories, cognition process takes place, how the willing function takes place, and so on. So we have a very detailed knowledge about all these functions in Jain philosophy. Thank you so much.